Upon envisioning a medieval warrior, our thoughts typically gravitate towards the myth of the armored knight. Riding a formidable steed encased in gleaming armor from head to foot, he embodies the essence of chivalry and combat skill. He battles for valor, his sovereign's cause, and the affection of a graceful maiden. Yet this portrayal, shaped by epic tales and blockbuster films, reflects merely a small, elite segment among medieval combatants. For each noble knight there existed many, even hundreds of regular troops whose warfare was not a route to renown, but a harsh and grueling task. These men's tale is recounted here. Leave the lord in his fortress behind. A common medieval warrior was a peasant yanked from his land, an apprentice to a blacksmith, or a hardened mercenary trading his blade for the best pay. His palms bore the marks of toil, not the grip of an ornate blade. He didn't battle for an elevated code of honor. He fought due to his lord's orders, the promise of some silver, or the tempting prospect of pillaging a conquered town. A possibility to gain enough riches to transform his destitute existence. His reality diverged from the grandeur of tournaments and the chivalric ideals of courtly love. It encompassed the rough wool that irritated his skin, the leather boots that let rain seep through, endless marches, persistent starvation, and an unrelenting, icy dread of a harsh, agonizing demise. He embodied the foot soldier mired in filth, the archer at the front, the crossbow specialist perched atop fortress walls. He was a disposable pawn in the game of monarchs and aristocrats. To grasp the genuine experience of a medieval warrior, we must discard the embellished tales and inhabit the soiled footwear of the average soldier, the individual who constituted the real, blood-stained foundation of every medieval legion. Medieval armies were not cohesive units as they are today. No centralized enlistment system or uniform instruction existed. Rather, it comprised a diverse assembly of individuals united by duty, vocation, or self-interest. Medieval men typically followed three routes to reach the warfront. The primary and prevalent route was duty. This constituted the era of the feudal core. The medieval social hierarchy rested upon a loyalty hierarchy. A peasant surrendered land for cultivation in return for a specified annual military obligation, often about 40 days. Upon being called to conflict by their sovereign, nobles would requisition service from their physically capable vassals. These individuals were not professional soldiers. They were laborers, smiths and roofers equipped with any available tools, a sharpened plow blade, a wooden axe, or a basic polearm. Their limited resources and minimal training made survival during the 40-day mission and returning home before harvest the sole focus. A clear divide separated the militia from the seasoned warrior, the man-at-arms. His path was defined by military service. He functioned as a combat specialist, frequently serving in a lord's standing military force. Despite lacking noble titles, he was an elite fighter immersed in battle. His lord equipped him with high-quality gear, a chainmail tunic, a metallic helm, a blade, and a buckler, which represented a substantial monetary outlay. These warriors formed the sturdy, reliable backbone of every military force, the rigorous infantry that could withstand a mounted assault. The third avenue was a dispassionate, calculated transaction, a soldier of fortune. As conflicts prolonged and intensified, monarchs demanded additional troops beyond the capacity of their feudal system. This generated a market for mercenary adventurers. Former soldiers from various European regions often joined forces with the highest bidders, driven by financial incentives and the lure of plunder. These groups frequently forged united fronts known as free companies, operating with autonomy and ambition. They showcased unmatched expertise and intimidation, yet their allegiance shifted with the fluctuating tides of coin and favor. An unpaid mercenary force posed a more severe risk to civilians than the opposing army itself. Visualize a medieval army as a blend of reluctant farmers, hardened fighters, and ruthless operatives, all united for a single violent endeavor. Discard the notion that all soldiers wore identical attire. A soldier's gear served as his individual survival pack, with contents mirroring his financial means, social standing, and military position. The disparity between a conscripted peasant and a seasoned warrior equaled that between a dilapidated bike and a battle-ready vehicle. Begin from the lowest level. The conscripted farmer arrived with essentials only. His armor commonly consisted of a gambeson, a heavy quilted linen jacket filled with wool or horsehair. Though it provided unexpectedly solid defense against slashes and blunt trauma, it failed against a straight spear strike, or a precisely shot arrow. He could don a reinforced leather helm or go unarmored atop his head. His main arm was the spear, inexpensive to craft and useful in collective combat. He could also wield a long blade or a wooden axe from his estate. His sole secondary protection consisted of a fundamental circular wooden shield. Advancement entailed the expert, akin to the celebrated English archer. He retained commoner status, yet possessed remarkable proficiency. His armor incorporated a gambeson for agility, though a steel skullcap was probable, a modest, wide-brimmed helm ensuring overhead defense. His principal armament, the yew longbow, represented an effective military tool, yet survival relied on maintaining a secure distance from adversaries. For hand-to-hand engagement, he wielded a compact blade or a falchion, a heavy, single-edged weapon, alongside a dagger. The seasoned fighter, a warrior specialized in direct confrontation, resembled an unbreakable fortress. His primary armor comprised a hauberk, a lengthy tunic of interwoven iron links called chainmail. Layered over his padded jacket, it delivered robust resistance to slicing attacks. His cranium was shielded by a standard steel helm, such as a bassinet, which could feature a flip-up visor. As time progressed, he progressively integrated additional components of metal protection for his lower legs, greaves, forearms, vambraces, and hands, gauntlets. Full metal armor was prohibitively costly, accessible mainly to the elite aristocracy. His weapons included premium grade, a balanced glaive, a crushing mace for breaching helmets, and frequently a staff weapon like a bill, merging spear, blade, and hook into a single tool. This equipment transcended mere garments. It represented a significant physical strain. A soldier might shoulder 50 to 70 pounds, 25 to 30 kilos of gear. It was sweltering, awkward, and raucous. Chainmail required regular lubrication to avoid corrosion. Sight and sound were greatly constrained within a helm. Most critically, its price was prohibitive. A single helm could match the cost of a bovine. A complete mail hauberk could equate to the value of a small farm. To a medieval soldier, his equipment was more than a uniform. It represented his life's savings and his sole opportunity for survival. War is frequently perceived as an unending series of valiant confrontations. For the medieval soldier, reality consisted of 90% overwhelming tedium and 10% pure dread. A soldier's campaign life revolved around endless marches, dull encampment routines, and the unrelenting hunger of an empty stomach. The marching force moved like a sluggish, weary entity. A soldier might endure weeks of travel, advancing approximately 10 to 15 miles daily across deteriorating paths. He carried the burden of 50-pound equipment, trudging through sticky mud during storms or suffocating in dry heat. Weariness followed him constantly, an aching fatigue in his limbs that never truly faded. When the army finally set up base, a harsh truth merely shifted to a new form. What occupied the unending time between parades and conflicts? Initially, training sessions were conducted. Repeatedly, soldiers honed their skills in line formation, synchronized movement, and reacting to instrumental cues. Non-commissioned officers and seasoned combatants issued commands, transforming unruly groups into disciplined forces. Subsequently, upkeep was a priority. A soldier's survival hinged on his gear, with countless hours dedicated to honing weapons, repairing leather harnesses, crafting fresh arrows, and ceaselessly maintaining chainmail to prevent rust. Most of the time, however, was spent in inactive anticipation. To alleviate the suffocating tedium, troops played dice games made of bone, shared vulgar tales by smoldering fires, or consumed any cheap, diluted beer on hand. Hostilities in the cramped, uneasy encampment simmered constantly, with minor disputes over crumbs or imagined slights often erupting into violent clashes. The most significant daily hardship might have been the rations. A soldier's meal was created to last, not to delight the palate. It usually included hardtack, a notoriously tough cracker, along with heavily salted meat, so harsh in flavor it required soaking before becoming palatable. These components were frequently combined in a pot to form a thin, oily broth known as pottage. This unchanging, bland sustenance powered the army's machinery, sparked ongoing grievances, and significantly impacted troop spirit. A soldier in the field longed not for honor, but for a warm meal and a sheltered spot to rest. The pause ended. The never-ending march, poor sustenance, and freezing nights, everything culminated in this singular harrowing moment. Positioned in a tight formation, side by side with perspiring, desperate men, the medieval warrior observed the enemy advance across the terrain. The atmosphere, previously buzzing with anxious talk, became heavy with a deafening quiet, set to shatter with the sound of war horns. The initial encounter with battle was typically devoid of personal connection and chaotically unpredictable. It commenced with a cacophony resembling a colossal curtain shredding as 1,000 bows discharged in synchrony. The heavens briefly dimmed as a swarm of projectiles arced skyward, descending in a lethal deluge. Endurance required no mastery, only the absence of misfortune. A warrior could only brace against his shield, endure the guttural thud of bolts colliding with metal and muscle, and implore that none pierced his defenses or the adjacent combatant. The force followed swiftly, unrelenting, and overwhelming. The two lines of men were more about crashing into each other than combat, a violent, pushing jumble of limbs, armor, and weapons. The front line transformed into a human slaughterhouse. This lacked the elegance of Bard's tales. It was a grim, desperate endeavor. The universe narrowed to the figure ahead. Your aim wasn't to achieve a daring act, but to maintain your shield, direct your spear, and ensure your footing is secure. Falling amidst the crowd meant certain death, crushed beneath feet or pierced by multiple foes before you could rise. However, the real terror for foot soldiers was the rumble of thunder on a cloudless day, the cavalry's attack. The earth would start shaking, a quiet rumble intensifying into a horrifying cacophony of galloping hooves and battle cries. A shield of horses and armored fighters armed with spears would rush toward the foot soldiers. For the soldiers at the forefront, this was an ordeal demanding unshakable resolve. A steadfast formation could create a shield of spear tips to halt the assault. A collapse would leave them vulnerable to being trampled and eliminated. Endurance during the turmoil relied on reflexes, endurance, and chance. It was a hectic mix of chopping, piercing, and pushing in a densely packed crowd. The cries of the injured and the fallen mingled with the clash of weapons and the guttural noises of struggle. Triumph or failure existed as a distant abstraction shaped by officers from afar. For the frontline combatant, endurance was the sole objective in the chaos. The noise dissipated into hushed murmurs, leaving a strained, silent tension interrupted by the wounded's whimpers. The standing soldier's first reaction was not exhilaration, but a staggering release of tension. He endured. Yet the conflict's aftermath became an intensified trial of agony, chance, and danger. The earliest harsh reality of the post-war environment was the lack of structured medical assistance for infantry. The terrain was marked by fractured bodies, scattered with the cries and movements of the injured. While a noble might secure a private healer for his wounds, a common warrior faced uncertainty or the crude support of allies. Medical practitioners, typically untrained craftsmen equipped with a blade and resilience, executed rough limb removals without pain relief. The primary cause of fatalities for most injuries was not the initial incision, but the unavoidable contamination that followed. A severe laceration, shattered bone, or a perforated abdomen typically led to certain demise. Endurance frequently relied on the extraordinary durability of one's physical state and a generous share of fortune. After the acute trauma subsided, an alternative impulse emerged: self-preservation. For the average soldier, this was his payment. Post-battle chaos was a brutal, frantic gathering called plundering. Soldiers roamed the battlefield like scavengers, stripping corpses, both allies and enemies, of worth. A steel helmet, sturdy leather boots, a blade, or some coins in a purse signified wealth. The highest reward was a knight's armor, fetching more than a farmer's lifetime earnings. This was the brutal equation of medieval conflict, the threat of demise balanced against the possibility of life-altering gain. At last, as night descended, war horns would signal the retreat. Commanders would shout orders into the shadows, striving to rebuild their fractured squadrons. A bleak inventory of survivors and fallen was recorded. The remnants, physically drained and frequently injured, would gather their spoils and embark on the tedious, unsteady return to base. There was no festivity, no triumphal march, only the silent, tormented awareness of their recent ordeal and the grim realization that they might face it all once more. The return journey was a silent march of specters, each individual lost in introspection, irreversibly altered by the atrocities witnessed and the actions required for survival. Contemporary military personnel faced the conclusion of their service, regardless of its duration, through official demobilization documents, veteran support, and typically a retirement allowance. Medieval combatants lacked any notion of a retirement allowance, where the government acknowledged its elderly or injured fighters. His departure from service wasn't a recognition of duty, but an intense, individual battle for existence in a society that saw no value in a man whose sole expertise was warfare. For the select few, experienced knights who had served their lords loyally for years, or mercenaries who had accumulated wealth through plunder or a noble's ransom, the future could be stable. A seasoned warrior could receive a modest parcel of land from a thankful lord. He might invest his accumulated coins into acquiring a pub or a modest enterprise within a settlement. Frequently, a veteran of proven loyalty could be assigned a stable, low-stress role as a castle sentinel, municipal patrol officer, or training instructor for initiates. This represented the most favorable outcome, a serene conclusion to a restless existence. Most people, however, faced a much grimmer outcome. The most harrowing ordeal awaited the soldier who suffered injuries without death. A man missing a limb or his vision became unproductive in a labor-centric society. He could no longer perform tasks like tilling land, striking metal, or safeguarding his own life. Without assistance, his future meant enduring poverty by supplicating at religious or urban thresholds, his severe injuries as the sole method to provoke empathy and minimal funds. He embodied the real price of conflict. What of those who came back unharmed? No hero's reception, no village procession. A serf, having completed his 40-day obligation, would merely return to his hamlet, seize his sickle or plow, and attempt to salvage his crop. He resumed his role as a cultivator, yet burdened by spectral memories of the front lines. A seasoned warrior could revert to his master's estate, yet if age hindered combat, he might be released with a modest final settlement. The conclusion of duty wasn't a recognized event. This phase was uncertain, frequently alarming. Medieval troopers faced no dignified exit. Only the final clash, the last endeavor, then a prolonged, silent effort to secure a role in a realm that had already shifted.